Hi everyone, good morning. And we will continue our lesson on biblical exegesis. In other words, the interpretation of Bible. This is class number 6, and we have been talking about what the biblical exegesis is. So this lessons, 10 classes, are going to deal with what the defining and understanding the biblical exegesis. And probably the next quarter, I'll try to present how you do biblical exegesis. But on this quarter, we are continuing to the definition and the concept of biblical exegesis. We want to know what we are doing in trying to interpret the Bible. And it involves basically the understanding Bible as the communication. And not only is it just the communication, but it is interpersonal communication. So last class, we've talked about what does the interpersonal communication is about. And we defined it as two or more personal beings communicating, having a relationship about personal matters or within the personal dimensions. So we use the word holistic to understand the interpersonal communication. So there's another word, holistic. The Bible is having holistic communication. It involves your emotions, your thoughts, your decisions, your guilt, your problems, your issues, and your inner heart, your desire, your motive. These are involved. So if someone tries to look into you, searches your heart, that would be scary, right? People usually try to hide their intentions, their motivations, and try to look nice to others. And that's sometimes being called as being ethical or being gentle or having some etiquette. But in reality, people trying to hide something that's inside. The Bible, on the other hand, tries to open everything from within. So whatever is inside you, including all the treasures and all the junks that are hidden in you, should be revealed. And that's what the holistic communication is about. And when you try to interpret the Bible, the way you do it properly is to be holistic about approaching the Bible. So as you read and try to understand the meaning and the message of the Bible, what we're trying to do is having that holistic or interpersonal communication with God. Very personal. You and God and only. No one else is involved. Later, you try to share what you have learned with others in the small groups or through the preaching if you are pastor. But to do so, this biblical exegesis, another way to interpret Bible, interpretation of Bible, is key. That personal interaction with the text that is given in the name of Bible, as the Bible, that is key to having that holistic communication. So we've been discussing this something about this text and the functions of text. So last class, at the end of last class, we have discussed that the function of the text, not the text of the Bible, but generally speaking, any text, the written text that are around us, many books, many materials that you read, they are to record what has happened. And I told you that the Bible records the context of everything that has gone. Not only the certain behavior of a person or words of God, but it includes the whole context of why God has given that words to the particular people and how these people reacted to the word of God. That's the context that we are looking at through the text. Again, so we are looking into the context through the text. A text or the text. But in our case, the Bible is the text. So that's the function of the text. It identifies and it distinguishes, then it expresses. So any text that you're reading, whether it's a newspaper or the storybook, you are going to see that these functions. So if you're reading a novel or a storybook or the philosophy book, the author is expressing his or her ideas, thoughts. So the function of text is to express. Why do you do the writings? You want to express who you are, what your thoughts are, what your ideas are, what your feelings are. So love letters, for example, it expresses how your heart is feeling about a certain person who receives your love letter, right? So that's the function of the text. Without the text, you may not be able to, you have to express face to face, but sometimes the text works better in expressing your thoughts. It can kind of condense your idea and your thoughts, and it delivers in very different ways. So thus, by doing the expression and recording and identifying and distinguishing or differentiating, you basically communicate. So text, the major function of the text is to record and to communicate with all these other different functions. But the major function of the text is to record and to communicate. Then, once the communication is also another function of text is to broadcast. So communication may happen between A and B. So that's basically most communication model. But this model if you are communicating your idea, your thoughts, and your desire, and you are expressing to many, multiple individuals or beings, then you are doing the broadcasting or spreading of the message. So what does text do? If you have one print, you can only probably speak to person B. But you are having the multiple copies of your letters or your books, then you are spreading that message to many. It's broadcast. So what the Bible does, the biblical text, it is designed to broadcast the message of God to many. When a prophet speaks, for example, in the Old Testament prophet, for example, Isaiah, he spoke. And that ends there. Only people who are sitting there, they listen. And fortunately, they had good memories. They memorized, put into rhythm and melody, into songs, and they repeat it, and they memorize it. And they sing that song with others. In that way, they did broadcast. But it is still limited. But when that you put into the text and you make copies of those texts, and then you can broadcast to more people. So what the text does here is to spread the message, to broadcast the message. Today, television and radio, they broadcast to millions at the same time. As long as you have a device to receive the broadcasting, you don't need a television today. You can use the smartphones act as radio and television at the same time. But so that means everyone has the way to receive the text and the message. But in the old days, they did not have this luxury of electronic devices. So they have to make written copies, the text after text. And then it was rare. And so the broadcasting was limited to few people. Now, before the device called smartphones or computers or internet, we had something called books. And the books were limited commodity. The paper was expensive in ancient days, right? And only the rich people and the royal ones, they are the ones who was able to own a copy of a book. See, the price of a book in the older days is like a price of cars today. So how many cars can you have? Just one or two at the most. The same thing in the ancient days. Even the rich people, the royals and the royalties, and those high class people, they owned just several books. So books were expensive commodity. In the ancient Israel, same thing. They used the skin of sheep, which is expensive, and they have to have the scribe to write and copy it, which is again expensive. So books were expensive until they invented this printing, and they invented a cheaper way of making papers. So when papers became cheap and the printing, you could print without handwriting, hand copying, and then they were able to broadcast to many. That's how the gospel has spread. So in the history, because of this Bible, the printing was invented in Europe by Gutenberg to print the Bible. That's why the printing was developed, and then those the segmented letter printing was invented by Gutenberg. But we have a couple hundred years earlier in the Asian, in Korea, they invented the same thing about 200 years before. But even that was developed because they wanted to print the Buddhist scripture. So these religious things, and especially the Christian, the Bible, became the motivation for developing the technology. And so anyway, the text that as they were invented and developed and written and printed, it broadcast the message to many more. Thus we benefit. And God used human inventions, human intelligence, and human skills, the technology to spread His word. And so that's function of the text. Here are some other examples of the text, and these are important as you try to understand the text. Text is not only limited to the written letters, written language, but spoken language is also considered text in a broad sense. So this is a broader definition of text. Not only is there other examples, it's broader definition of text. So the word text can be used in other than the written letters, written language. Text includes documents. Picture is also considered as text. The video today is also a kind of text in a broader sense, broader definition. Artworks, these are also may considered as the text. Not only these. Okay. There's some. Yeah. Let's go this first. Other semantics of text. Not only the text is, these are considered as text today, but in anthropology, in the study of a culture, these are considered as text. Community is also considered as text. What? When we talk about the context, a community can be considered as text. When we talk about the context, you can be the text. A person can be a text. A church, when we're talking about the world mission, church is a text. And the word is context. Life and existence, it becomes your text when the reality is context. So the text can be used in many different ways. For example, again, This is the reality that we live in. Reality is current, so it's present now, and it is also real. It happens right now. So the happenings that are around you now is reality. Then there's your existence. In other words, your life. You're living. So your living life, it becomes the text, while the reality is considered context. So this is one example of, so text is something that is in the middle, in the core, compared to the context that is surrounding the text. So as you perceive, this is a very anthropological way of looking to the your world. It's a way to conceptualize. So text and the context, these concepts are very important. And community, you, church, and your life and your existence can be considered as a text. So the text, word text, is not only limited to the written letters that you see on a page of a book. That's basically what the text is, by definition. But this concept can be extended or broadened, including all these things. So now I want you to get the concept of text properly. But when we deal with the Bible, the text, basically it means the written words in the Bible. Okay, so that's basically text. When we talk about the contextualization, the text may mean more than just the written letters. Again, the issues with the text is the translation and the limitation. So the text, the written text, may be written in some other language than that you may understand. So that would be the problem, right? Initially, the Bible is written in Hebrew, Aramaic. Aramaic is a part of kind of Hebrew. So Hebrew and the Greek. So that's basically two languages that the Bible is written. So the original, the copies of the Bible are either in Hebrew or in Greek. And then in the Old Testament has two versions, Hebrew version and the so-called Septuagint. Septuagint is a Greek version of Old Testament that has been translated into the Greek. So again, the Septuagint is a translation. If that's the case, the New Testament is written in Greek and Old Testament is originally written in Hebrew. So these texts, Hebrew and Greek, need to be translated into other languages. And the first languages that were translated is, of course, the Greek. So they translated Old Testament into Greek. So you have Greek version of Old Testament and New Testament. And then later on, they added Latin. Latin is a special language used amongst the Latin world, including Greece, Italia, Spain, Portugal, and even some part of France. They use the Latin language to read the Bible. And because of that, the Catholic Church originally they used a Latin language to address a mass, and that was the official language of Catholic Church. So that translation. Then later on, they translated it into English, German, and French. So some European languages are the first languages that translated the Greek and Hebrew Bible into. So why are these translations are the issues? Because when you are translating, there are some problems. Some of the terms, some of the concepts cannot exactly translate it into other languages because of the culture, because of their history. I mean, they may not have a certain concept. They may not have certain plants that are mentioned in the Bible. They may not have certain the ritual that are mentioned in the Old Testament. So when these things happen, you have difficulty in translation, and you have to use some other terms or the expressions or even the concepts to translate those. So when you translate, there is a possibility of distorting the message. Distortion is a big issue. It's a trouble issue when you do the translation. If you distort the meaning and the message, then there is not a good translation. But fortunately, all the biblical translators do their best. They're to their best not to distort the message and the meaning. So that is a key to doing your interpretation as well. So biblical exegesis, when you do it, you are not trying to distort the message or the meaning of the Bible. So in some sense, the interpretation, translation is a way of interpretation, right? So you when you translate, you have to, to some degree, you have to not only just translate, but you have to interpret. So translation and interpretation may have something that is common, but basically translation is bringing the text from one language to another language without changing the meaning of the message. So that's the main idea of the translation. While interpretation goes further than translation. The translation is very objective process, objective task, while interpretation may become a very personal task. And it could extend to personal tasks. So interpretation can be personal, but translation should never be personal or subjective. It has to be objective, and it has to be very common and within the common sense. So that's a translation, and it does have issues of possibility of distortion. And the limitation of the text is limited. Text only can record just to the limited. It cannot record everything that the context is involved. So in the best of the author's intention of the Bible, they had recorded the things they think as the key and the important, and which is the essential. So that any text, any recording of the text limits it to the essentials. It cannot record everything and all things. Even the videos that today, it only records to give the certain angles. If you like a soccer, they have something called the VAR, right? Video assisted referee. Even the VAR, they do not show everything fully. So that's a limitation, kind of a limitation of the text. And they use multiple cameras from every direction, but still, it's not perfect. So that's the limitation of the text that we are using. But we assume the Bible has recorded with the text all the essentials that we need to know. We need to know. Even though God has not recorded everything that had happened, even though the text is limited, it does record or writes everything that is essential. That is how we approach the Bible as we try to interpret. And that's kind of, I think that's the difference between the Bible scholars. Among the Bible scholars, there are those who try to deny or devalue the message of Bible. And there are those who try to find with a genuine heart, the message of the Bible. So there are two different groups basically, and you may fall into one of them. But biblical exegesis are those, if you are trying to do biblical exegesis, you are the ones who are genuinely considering the Bible as the message of God. So that's kind of attitude that we need to exhibit as we deal with the message of God, so-called the Bible. Now we come to understanding the context. Context is, again, as much as text may have a very different semantics and the concepts and the definitions, same thing with the context. So it is important to definition of context in anthropology. Anthropology is study of culture, study of human behavior, human culture. So basically, anthropology deals with the human context. And in this anthropological definition of context, it involves the reality. See here, this reality that we live in. And it also includes that existence as well. That can be the context. Well, if you or we, when you or we are the text, then the existence also becomes the context. So the definition of context depends on how we define the text in a given situation. So culture is basically in anthropology, culture equals to the context. Context means culture. That's the general understanding of context in anthropology. And culture is a main context, major context in anthropology. And so when we talk about context in the cultural anthropology, It means the culture itself. So these are some of the definitions of context in anthropology. Okay, so we begin with the reality as a context or the context. So what does the reality involve? First, people, culture, history, society, and ecology. There are some other elements, but these elements covers their understanding of context. So when we talk about the contextualization, as we've discussed at the beginning in the last class, when we say contextualization, it means you're going back to that given context in the Bible and try to understand these things. So the people in that time, the culture in that given place and time, and then history at the given situation of the Bible. So actually you're trying to go back to that time of the year and the hour. Then in the given time of the year, it does not happen by itself, but it has a long history to come to the given situation. For example, there are the 10 plagues recorded that were given to Egyptian people as a result of them not giving permission for Jews to leave the country. So Pharaoh and the Egyptian people wanted to keep the Jews as their slaves because they are good slaves. I mean, they do all the dirty works and they do all the hard works for you. And who wants them to go? So they hold them and they break promises after promise, and each time God just gives this plagues, 10 different plagues to these people. So when you're dealing with this, each plague, you have this history of 400 years. Out of those 400 years, major part of letter of those history, 200 plus years, they have been slaves to Egyptian people. So you need to know, you have that background of history of slavery as you come into that particular text of situation where they are trying to leave and to be freed from this Egyptian oppression. So that's kind of a historical context that we are talking about as you use the biblical exegesis. Another example, the Jesus Christ in the gospel. You gotta know, they've been under the Roman Empire as a colony of Roman power. The Roman Empire colonized this Palestine and then Jewish settlement for many years now. And the people are expecting the political Messiah. They're expecting to be freed by this Messiah, that's this hero, Jewish hero, coming amongst themselves and rising against the Roman Empire and destroying that big power with the help of God, the mighty God, and this militant figure, the political leader. They were expecting that kind of Messiah when Jesus was just a 30-year-old young man from the land of Galilee, which is not such a good town, the Israeli people. And his job is a carpenter. He deals with the stone and the wood to make these productions. And the lowest kind of people. So there's such a big difference among the expectation. So if you know that historical background, that's contextualization, and you try to understand from their point of view how they expected Jesus to be, the Messiah to be. And Judah, the Iscariot Judah is one of them. He was expecting that political power, the mighty military leader. But reality is different from what he had expected. So he was disappointed against Jesus Christ. That's why he was selling Jesus to Roman authority or the Jewish authority. So that's kind of a historical context. The social context of society is part of it. And then ecology, the climate, the feel of the weather. So if you try to understand the story of Jonah, Jonah is one of the prophets, Old Testament prophets, the minor prophet, who had received a message from God to go to the land of Nineveh, the city of Nineveh, which is a part of Syria. And the Syria and Israel are their enemies, long-time enemies. Maybe I don't want any political misunderstanding, but like a history between Japan and Korea. If you're Korean and Japanese, you know what I'm talking. Between German and England, German and France, they are neighbors, but they are not. They have their history. So it's like them. So this Jonah, he doesn't want to go there because what God told to Jonah was go to people of Nineveh. He would have understood if God told Jonah to go to people of Israel and tell them to repent, then maybe understood. But to go to Syrian people and to tell them repent so they can be saved, he could not accept that. So he kind of goes out to the desert and then kind of excluded himself, isolates himself, not listening to or obeying, having intention to obey to God. And there's a story of this plant growing and having the large leaves in the desert. So he hides there, and then he enjoys the cool of the shade, and then suddenly there's a bug coming up and cutting off that leaf, and then he was again exposed to that hot daylight, the desert sun. If you live in a country or ecology or environment where there is no desert, you may not be able to understand that the story. So the contextualization that in that case means that you try to understand the heat of desert as 50 degrees in centigrade, and in Fahrenheit as 120 plus degrees, really, really hot. So if you have never experienced that, you may not be able to understand the depth and then degree of suffering that Jonah is suffering by not listening to God. So these are like elements that you are trying to contextualize. So when you really know and experience, I mean, if you live in one of those Middle Eastern countries where the desert weather is a daily thing, they'll understand what it means right away. There's no need to explain. But you're living in Alaska, that's a different story. You need to go as much as possible to feel that heat and then the suffering and the pain that Jonah had experienced. So these are some of the examples of reality as context. And so as you do the exegesis, the interpretation of Bible, contextualization and context as reality is important. These elements does affect your understanding of the passage. So the people is one of the key, and the culture, I explained, and society involves all these elements. So social structure, the way people deals, does the commerce or business, these are all social elements. The ranks, and today in the democratic society we live in, we do not really understand the king and the rank of those royalties than to be just general public, the common people, than to be the slave. I mean, it's in your imagination, but you don't fully understand it. But to be able to understand the message, you need to go back to that society and understand these elements. And for example, the Joseph, the son of Jacob, he becomes a slave in Egypt, and he becomes a slave of Bonaparte, who is the captain of royal guard. So captain of the royal guard is like guards, today's guards for the president, right? So pretty similar. But being slave is a different thing. You never been to slavery, and you may not understand what the gratitude, I mean the gravity of being a slave feels like. So these things, society and the history we talked about, ecology, and these becomes the elements. Okay, then existence. We talked about that existence as context. So human existence within that reality called the people, history, society, and the culture and the ecology. Within that, there is something called the existence. Your existence becomes the context when you are trying to do the exegesis. You're coming from your time to their time. You're coming from your place to their place, and that their existence is different from your existence that you're experiencing today. And those existence includes these things: politics, religion, economy, and education, health, media, sports, arts, and science, technology, race, ethnicity, and entertainment. So let's go into politics. Today in America, we are living in a democratic society where each individual's right is respected, valued, and protected. But in the biblical times, that's not so. That's totally different political context. So their existence, their understanding of politics different. When they speak of king, a king is a big thing. But the same word king is different. Abraham is a king in some sense. And he was the leader of certain tribe. So he's a tribal king. Then King David and King Saul did this as a different scale. They are national king. They are king of a nation, a much bigger tribe. They had 12 tribes. While Abram is just one minor tribe, this tribe is at least several million people. They are ruling. So that's a different scale of king. And the King Solomon is much bigger nation than that of King David. So even though we talk about those kings, which is quite different from what we know as a president today, even those kings have different scales and a different political power. So when we do the exegesis, the interpretation, sometimes, not always, but sometimes we need to know the political system, the political context of the time to understand the particular message. The religion always is a big thing in the understanding of biblical context. So we need to know what the Baal worship is. Or we need to know what Mammonites they were worshiping. And we need to know why the idol worship of the golden cow is a big issue. Because that's the culture and the religion that they were brought from the Egypt. So they did not actually cut off the Egyptian values and worldviews. They are still having that, and God didn't want that. So to understand that the gravity of the sin of the worship of idol cow, that's you have to understand the religion of Egyptian culture at the time. An economy. For example, in the story of I believe it's Jacob, right? In the story of Jacob, there is a story about the sheep and the goats, and he become rich as he multiplies his goats and sheep. And if you do not know the value of each goat at the time of Jacob, that you are not able to imagine the wealth and the worth of camel and worth of horse, worth of a cow. You need to know the value of these things. And in the New Testament, in the Gospel, they have different values for each coin. There's a silver coin and gold coin, and there is also Roman coin and the coins used amongst the Jews. So we need to know this economy as well to better understand the message. So value of denarium, comparative value of Rafton. These are the value of each coin at the time, and we need to know that. So these are the example of contextualization. And so existence as context when we deal with the economy. The education. For example, the Saint Paul, the Apostle Paul, as written in the Bible, he was educated in the under the foot of commanding, and we need to understand the education system. What does it mean to be under the foot of some teacher? And this teacher mentioned in the New Testament, he is one of the best teachers known at the time. So we could say, and today's value, Paul, the Apostle Paul, has an educational background as a probably postdoc, not just a PhD, and he goes beyond the PhD. So he was well educated, which means he was in the wealthy and very religious prestige class of people at the time. And then he also had a Roman citizenship as well as a Jewish, pure Jewish breed. Understanding education of Paul helps us to understand the context better and the message better. So education becomes a good part of health, media, and the sports. These are not really involved, but sports. In the New Testament, there are the mentions of the ancient Olympics. So if you have some more knowledge about the ancient Olympic, you may be able to understand the 1st and 2nd Timothy better, because there are pictures of the athletic pursuing the medal, the olive crown. So what does the olive crown mean? It's only were given to the some of the winners in the early Olympics, modern Olympics today. But for ancient Olympics, that's a totally different thing, and it has more values. So you need to study the ancient sports to be able to fully contextualize the message. So when you read those things mentioned in the New Testament, that you want to associate the sports, the arena they played on, the Roman Empire, and then the Roman sports, we need to know those to better understand or to have a better interpretation of the text. So that's text, context through the text. See, as you read the text, you go to that contextualization. Arts are also very important key to the contextualization, because there are many mentions of artistic things in the Bible. For example, the priest in the Old Testament, the Deuteronomy and what else? Numbers. It mentions about how these the artifacts are made for the priest to wear, and it has all the artistic terms and descriptions that are written there. And also the mention of ark. Ark is a golden box that contained the scripture and Moses stuff and these things. And it has a very detailed artistic descriptions. And if you are not an expert of art, especially the ancient Jewish art, you will have no idea what they are talking about. So to better have better biblical exegesis, you have to also study some ancient Jewish art as well. So the exegesis is not just an interpretation of the text or study of text, but it goes beyond the text and go to the understanding of the context, the existence, and the way they did arts. And it helps you to better understand the text. Science, they didn't have much science, but they did have some technology written in the Bible. And also with the same manner, you need to understand the very technological things to better understand. Race and ethnicity is a big thing in a contextualization. We still have these racial issues. The Black Lives Matter is a big thing today in America. But these things goes way beyond our time. And the severity of this ethnic division and ethnic rivalry and ethnic conflict was much deeper in the ancient time. And this ethnic or racial conflict and the struggle and prejudice were even was promoted amongst Jews, and then surrounding the ethnic groups. So how do we understand those conflicts? That the promotion of such ethnic conflicts. So that is different from what we have of our days. And it is important to go back to the origin of ethnicity, the race, and the God choosing the Hebrews, Jews as the chosen people. All these ideas are key to understanding the message. And some people have very twisted idea about these ethnic issues in the Bible. As their existence, ethnic difference, Jews and non-Jews, Jews and Gentiles, it was a big thing to the Old Testament messages, Old Testament recordings. And we need to have some ideas and a better understanding about it. And unless you study Bible and then related materials, you will not come with a balanced view about ethnicity. The entertainment is also part of the existence as context. And see, there are some good examples of entertainment of ancient time. Storytelling was one of them. You may not understand why sitting and listening to someone else's story is a big thing at the time of Jesus, and even go beyond that in the time of Moses and time of Abraham. I mean, they did not have any other entertainment other than music, dance, and storytelling. See, these are the major entertainments. And the storytelling is key, a very critical to understanding of biblical messages. Because, see, the Bible, before it becomes a written script, written text, it was always has been the storytelling. And those storytellers tried their best to memorize each story without distortion. See, distortion. So the exact memorization of the text in verbal text, in that case, not the written text, but verbal text was key to these storytellers. So, and it became the form of entertainment, and children enjoyed sitting and listening to these biblical stories, ancient stories of their ancestors as they were crossing that the Red Sea, and then they having that victory over Egyptian militant power, and how God destroyed this Egyptian army. These stories, as they listen, it becomes a very vivid picture. They use their own imagination to picture this in their thoughts. So this kind of entertainment, we are provided with the visual elements as we watch movie and as we watch TV dramas. Sometimes it's great, it's better, but not better in sense of developing your imagination and truly getting into that message itself. And as they listen, they not just listen and then throw the one ear, comes to one ear and pass out to another ear, but they bring it to their hearts and to their imagination. So storytelling was very key entertainment of the time, and it becomes in different forms today, but still the storytelling is a key element. All the movies, all the dramas that you watch on TV, and even those so-called reality shows that they show on TV, that's also a storytelling of a certain celebrity and certain characters. See, so you can probably associate today's modern storytelling to the ancient one. And as you try to contextualize, try to imagine that sitting and listening, during the night around the fire, at the bonfire, trying to, it's the same picture with Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ does this storytelling. It's a way of entertainment. It's a way of education. And if you don't, have the idea of how that happened, it's sometimes difficult to understand and interpret that message that's given in the Bible. So the existence. Now, culture as context. Usually this is the main thing when we do the anthropology and when we do the exegesis. Most of the scholars focus on the culture as context. So when we talk about the contextualization, usually it means we're going into the certain culture to understand that different culture. Because their culture, the Jewish culture, Greek culture, Roman culture, is different from ours. not only is different from ours, but it's ancient culture. So today's Roman culture is very different from the culture that was depicted or pictured in the Bible. The Jewish culture today is very different from that one that was pictured in the time of Jesus. So it takes not only the time, but I mean the cultural difference, but cultural difference of time. So that's what we do when we do the culture as context. And this culture involves these topics, these subjects, as a way of existence. So culture is a way of reality and existence. So culture involves both. It's a reality that we come into as a person. So if you are born into Korea, you're getting into Korean reality. But you're also facing the culture, Korean existence. So that's culture and existence. I mean, the reality and existence together create as context of culture. So divinity and spirit. Culture always deal with this topic, whether it's so-called primitive culture or mature culture, it doesn't matter. Excuse me. So the talking about the God or gods or spirit, whether it's the ancestor spirit or animal spirit or spirit of the big stone or tree, doesn't matter. These things are major discussion in any culture. And when you study a culture or trying to contextualize the way the people understood about the God and gods and the spirits, that's key to understanding the biblical message. Because Bible deals mainly with divinity, God, and the spirits. That's the unseen world. But even though it's not a visible world, the culture, every culture that you find in the world, even if it's more than one, it deals with this topic of God and the Spirit. So that is one of the key to understanding the essence and the color and nature of a culture. So this is one subject that we are going to continue in the next class. And thank you for listening, and thank you for coming to this particular lesson. And I'll see you guys next week. Bye. Thank you.